My name is Alara Vance. For most of my 34 years, my life has been painted in the gentle, muted tones of the Pacific Northwest. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, a city where the sky is often a soft, pearly gray and the air smells of damp earth and blooming roses. My world was one of quiet ambitions and deep-seated loves. I loved the rhythmic tap of rain against the windowpane of our craftsman bungalow in Laurelhurst, the way the morning light filtered through the tall Douglas firs in our backyard, and more than anything, I loved my husband, Liam. Liam was the vibrant splash of color in my serene landscape. We'd met in a ridiculously cliché way, huddled under the same awning during a sudden downpour, both of us having forgotten our umbrellas. He was an architect, a man who saw poetry in structure and light, and he had a laugh that could chase away the most persistent Portland drizzle. For 10 years, we built a life that felt as solid and beautiful as the bridges spanning the Willamette River. We restored our old house, filling it with books, art, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. We dreamed of filling its rooms with the sound of children's laughter, a dream we pursued with quiet, aching hope through years of frustrating and inconclusive fertility treatments. Liam was always my rock, his optimism a steady flame against the winds of my disappointment. "It'll happen when it's meant to, Eli," he would murmur, wrapping his arms around me. "And until then, I have you. That's more than enough." Then, on a Tuesday in October, the sky fell. A logging truck on a slick, leaf-strewn highway lost control. Liam, on his way back from a site visit, was in the wrong place at the cruelest moment. The life we had so carefully constructed was obliterated in an instant. The first few months after his death are a colorless blur in my memory, a watercolor painting left out in the rain. There was the funeral, a sea of black coats and sympathetic faces that all seemed to merge into one. There were the casseroles left on the porch, the well-meaning but hollow reassurances, the crushing weight of silence in a house that once echoed with laughter. My work at Stone and Vine Creative, a boutique branding agency where I was a senior designer, felt trivial, the colors on my screen mocking the gray void inside me. It was during this time that the most unexpected shift occurred. My parents, Robert and Susan, had always been a distant constellation in my life. Their universe had, for as long as I could remember, revolved around my younger sister, Chloe. Chloe was the supernova, dazzling, dramatic, and demanding of all the gravitational pull in our family. Her dance competitions, her theater roles, her whirlwind romances, these were the headlines of our family newsletter. My academic scholarships, my quiet successes in my career, were footnotes. But after Liam's death, my parents seemed to re-enter my orbit. They began a ritual of Sunday dinners at their sprawling, manicured home in Lake Oswego. My mother, who had never been one for overt affection, would fuss over me, making sure my plate was full of her famous roasted chicken. My father, a man who usually communicated in grunts and stock market updates, would ask about my week with a gentle, concerned expression I'd never seen before. "How are you holding up, Eli?" he asked one evening, his voice soft as he topped up my wine glass. "Really, how are you?" "I'm managing," I'd said, the lump in my throat making the word feel like a lie. "Some days are harder than others." "We're here for you, sweetheart," my mother added, reaching across the table to pat my hand. The gesture was so uncharacteristic it almost made me flinch. "Anything you need, you just have to ask." This newfound warmth was a balm on my raw grief. For the first time, I felt seen by them, truly cared for. So when my father, a few weeks later, hesitantly mentioned they were feeling a bit stretched financially, I didn't hesitate. Would it be possible to help us out with the mortgage for a little while?" he'd asked, looking at his plate. "Just until I close a few big deals at the firm. Maybe $2,000 a month?" Of course, I'd said immediately, a wave of gratitude washing over me. Liam had been a prudent planner. He'd left me with our beautiful home, a modern condo in the Pearl District that we'd rented out, and a financial portfolio that meant I didn't have to worry about money. Helping them felt like a small way to repay the comfort they were giving me. It felt like we were finally becoming the family I had always yearned for. I was so caught up in this illusion of belonging that I didn't see the fault lines forming beneath the surface. The first tremor came the night Chloe joined us for dinner. She swept in like a summer storm, 6 months pregnant and radiating a triumphant energy that sucked all the air out of the room. I hadn't seen her since the funeral, where she had seemed oddly detached, more annoyed by the inconvenience than saddened by the loss. "Chloe, darling," my mother exclaimed, rushing to her side and guiding her to the most comfortable chair. "Let me get you a cushion. Are your ankles swollen? You're glowing." Just like that, the spotlight swiveled. My father's attention was captured, my mother's fussing redirected. I became part of the background scenery again, a familiar ache settling in my chest. It was a feeling I knew well, the quiet invisibility of being the other daughter. "So, who's the lucky guy?" I asked during a lull in the conversation, genuinely curious. I tried to infuse my voice with the casual warmth our family was supposedly building. Chloe shot me a look that was pure ice. "That's private, Alara," she said, her tone sharp. "I'm not really in the mood to be interrogated." "Chloe's right," my mother interjected, her voice laced with warning. "It's her business. Let's not pry." The hypocrisy was staggering. When Liam and I had been navigating the painful, private journey of infertility, my mother had felt entitled to every detail. She'd offered unsolicited advice, questioned our doctor's methods, and made me feel like my body was a public project under failing management. Now, with Chloe, the walls of privacy were sacrosanct. Over the next few weeks, the tension thickened. Chloe became a permanent fixture at our Sunday dinners, her pregnancy the sole topic of conversation. My tentative connection with my parents withered under the glare of her needs. I watched her, a growing unease coiling in my stomach. She carried herself with a strange, smug confidence, a secret knowledge that seemed to hum just beneath her skin. "A baby is a huge expense," I ventured one evening, watching her accept a second helping of dessert. "Have you thought about how you'll manage on your own?" She waved a dismissive hand, a smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, don't you worry your pretty little head about me and my baby," she said, patting her rounded belly. "We're going to be more than taken care of. Everything is already figured out." I should have recognized the signs. It was the same secretive smile she'd worn before launching a disastrous Etsy shop for artisanal terrariums or investing her savings in a pyramid scheme disguised as a wellness supplement company. But this time, her confidence felt different. It was less about wishful thinking and more about a settled, certain future. A future I couldn't begin to imagine the source of. The invitation arrived via a glossy, pearl-finished card in the mail. A baby shower for Chloe, to be held at our parents' home. My first instinct was to decline. The thought of spending an afternoon surrounded by her friends, celebrating a pregnancy shrouded in such hostile secrecy, made me feel exhausted. But a small, hopeful part of me wondered if this was an olive branch. Maybe this was Chloe's way of finally including me. I spent a week searching for the perfect gift, settling on something I thought was uniquely personal. I commissioned a local artist to create a custom illustrated book of Oregon folk tales with a beautiful, hand-bound leather cover. It felt like a piece of our shared childhood, a bridge to a simpler time. When I arrived at the house, it was a pastel wonderland. Pink and gold balloons floated to the ceiling, a 3-tiered diaper cake dominated the dining table, and the air was thick with the scent of sugar and expensive perfume. Chloe was the queen on her throne, holding court in a flowing silk dress that did little to hide her triumphant glow. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek that felt as cold as stone. "Eli, I'm so glad you could make it," she purred, her eyes scanning me with an unnerving intensity. "I have a feeling today is going to be very memorable." The afternoon passed in a blur of saccharine games and forced laughter. I watched my mother and father dote on Chloe, their faces alight with a pride I had never earned. I felt like a ghost at the feast, an observer from another dimension. Finally, it was time for gifts. Chloe opened each one with theatrical oohs and ahs. When she got to mine, she held up the book, her expression unreadable. She ran a finger over the cover, then set it aside without a word. My heart sank. Then she stood up, clinking a spoon against a crystal glass. The chatter died down instantly. Every eye in the room was on her. "Thank you all so much for being here to celebrate with me," she began, placing a protective hand on her belly. The gesture seemed rehearsed, a part of a well-practiced script. "It means the world to me. But there's one more thing. A very important announcement I need to make." Her eyes found mine across the room, and in their depths, I saw a chilling glint of victory. My blood ran cold. I knew, in that gut-wrenching, world-stopping moment, that my life was about to be torn apart again. "I know you've all been wondering about the father," she continued, her voice ringing with feigned emotion. "I've kept it private because the situation is complicated, painful. But my child deserves to have his identity known. He deserves his legacy." She took a deep, dramatic breath. "The father of my baby is Liam Vance, my sister's late husband." The world didn't just tilt, it shattered. A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by a frantic buzz of whispers. I saw my aunt's hand fly to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. I saw Chloe's friends huddle together, their expressions a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. But the only thing I could truly see was my parents' faces. There was no shock, no confusion. There was only a quiet, resolute solemnity. They had known. This whole performance, this entire public execution of my heart, had been staged with their full knowledge and consent. Before the roaring in my ears could subside, Chloe twisted the knife. She turned to me, her voice dripping with a syrupy, false pity. "Alara, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. But Liam and we were in love. He was going to leave you. This baby is his only child, his heir. And as his mother, I have to do what's right. My son is entitled to his father's inheritance. Half of everything Liam left you belongs to him." The room began to spin. I gripped the back of a chair, my knuckles white. And then, my parents stepped forward, flanking Chloe like sentinels. "Alara," my father said, his voice hard, devoid of the gentle concern he had feigned for months. "Chloe is right. You need to be sensible about this. A child is involved. Liam's child. You have to do the honorable thing." His words, "the honorable thing," broke the spell of my paralysis. A white-hot rage, pure and clean, sliced through my grief. "No," I whispered, the word a ragged tear in the silence. "No. You're lying." "Am I?" Chloe's smile was cruel. She pulled out her phone and held it up. The screen showed a photo of her and Liam, his arms wrapped around her, their lips pressed together in a kiss. Another photo showed them at a table in a waterfront restaurant, holding hands, smiling at each other with an intimacy that stole my breath. "He told me he hadn't loved you for years," she declared, her voice rising to fill the silent, horrified room. "We were planning our future. The accident, it just happened before we could tell you." I didn't hear the rest. My body moved on its own, a vessel carrying a payload of unbearable pain. I walked through the crowd of whispering guests, my eyes fixed on the front door. I heard my mother call my name, a sharp, commanding sound, but I didn't stop. I fled into the cool, gray afternoon, the familiar Portland sky now feeling alien and hostile. The drive back to my empty house was a waking nightmare. My mind was a kaleidoscope of betrayal, the images from Chloe's phone replaying on a loop. The business trips to Seattle, the late nights at the office, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Back in the sanctuary of my home, which now felt like a crime scene, my phone began to buzz relentlessly. It was Chloe, sending me a barrage of screenshots. Text messages between her and Liam. "Liam, can't stop thinking about you." "Chloe, you too. When can I see you again? I hate pretending around her." "Liam, soon. I promise." Once this next project is done, we'll tell her. We'll start our life. Chloe, I love you. Liam, I love you more. Each message was a fresh wound. The timestamps went back over a year. A year of him lying beside me in our bed, of him holding my hand in sterile doctors' offices, while I blamed my own body for our childlessness. A year of my own sister, my own parents, conspiring behind the curtain of our lives. I spent that night wandering through the rooms of my house, touching the things he had touched, looking at the life he had built with me, and seeing it all as a lie. The foundation wasn't solid. It was made of sand, and the tide had just come in. The call from my father came at 8 a.m. the next morning. Alara, we need to talk, he began, forgoing any greeting. I've spoken to a lawyer. The most sensible path forward is for you to sign over half of the assets to a trust for the baby. It will be cleaner that way. The casual cruelty of his pragmatism was breathtaking. Cleaner for who? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. For everyone. My mother's voice joined in from a speakerphone. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be, Alara. Think of your nephew. A single question burned on my tongue. How long? I asked. How long did you know? There was a telling pause, a split second of shared hesitation that spoke volumes. Liam came to us about 8 months ago, my mother finally admitted, her voice strained. He was conflicted. He loved you both. We were trying to help him figure out the right way to handle it. 8 months. They had sat at my table, eaten my food, accepted my money, $2,000 a month, every month, all while knowing my husband was betraying me with my sister. They had comforted me at his funeral, their arms around my shoulders, their faces masks of sympathy. Traitors, I said, the word falling like a stone into a deep, dark well. All of you. I ended the call and, with a steady hand, blocked their numbers. Then I opened my banking app and canceled the automatic monthly transfer. A small, cold act of severance. It was the first boundary I had ever set. The weeks that followed were a descent into a gray fog. A formal letter arrived from Chloe's lawyer, outlining her legal claim to Liam's estate and demanding I cooperate fully to avoid a protracted and painful court battle. The whispers at work became a dull roar. The pitying looks, the hushed conversations that stopped when I entered a room, it was unbearable. My friend and boss, Maya, called me into her office, her face a mask of concern. Eli, take some time, she said, her voice gentle. As much as you need. Your job is safe. Just go home and breathe. I took her advice. I became a recluse in my own home, the beautiful craftsman bungalow now feeling like a prison. I had groceries delivered. I let the doorbell ring unanswered. I spent days staring out at the rain, my grief now tangled with a rage so profound it left me breathless. The news of the birth came, as all modern news seems to, via a social media post. A photo of Chloe in a hospital bed, looking beatific, holding a swaddled infant. My parents were on either side of her, beaming, the proud grandparents. She had named him Liam Jr., the final, possessive claim. The court summons was the final blow. It was real. This wasn't just a family drama, it was a legal war, and I was utterly alone. After days of numbly scrolling through law firm websites, I found David Chin, an attorney specializing in complex estate disputes, known for his calm demeanor and sharp mind. In his quiet, minimalist office overlooking the river, he reviewed the documents Chloe's lawyer had sent. His expression was professionally neutral, but his eyes were kind. Ms. Vance, he said, steepling his fingers. I need to be forthright. The evidence they've presented, the text messages, the photos, your parents' testimony, it creates a strong narrative. In the eyes of the court, a proven long-term affair combined with a biological child often leads to a favorable outcome for the child's claim. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. It wasn't just my heart that was broken. My future was being methodically dismantled. That evening, as I was making a cup of tea I had no intention of drinking, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something compelled me to answer. Hello, may I speak to Alara Vance? A woman's voice asked. It was a low, melodic voice, strangely familiar, like a half-remembered song. This is she, I said. There was a pause. My name is Evelyn. Evelyn Monroe. I was Liam's mother. I sank onto a kitchen chair, the phone slick in my hand. That's not possible, I whispered. Liam was an orphan. His parents died in an accident when he was a child. That, she said, her voice thick with a sorrow that felt ancient, is what he wanted people to believe. It's a long story. I saw the notice of his death in the paper. And recently, a friend of a friend told me about the situation with your sister. Alara, there are things you need to know. Things that might help. Would you be willing to meet me? We met the next morning at a small, quiet cafe in Selwood. I watched her walk in, a tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that were so much like Liam's it was a physical blow. She moved with his same easy grace. I was at the funeral, she said, her voice trembling slightly as she sat down. I stood in the back. I wanted to come to you, but we were estranged for so long. It didn't feel like my place. I remembered her then, a solitary, veiled figure who had slipped away before the end. I had been too lost in my own fog to register her. Why now? I asked, my voice raw. Trust was a currency I no longer possessed. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she reached into her handbag and pulled out a worn, slightly yellowed manila envelope. She slid it across the table. Because my son built a life on secrets, she said, her gaze unwavering. And I will not stand by and watch those secrets destroy another woman's life. My hands shook as I opened the clasp. Inside was a set of medical records from a Boston fertility clinic, dated 12 years ago, before Liam had even moved to Portland. I scanned the page, my eyes catching on the clinical, devastating terminology. Azoospermia. Bilateral vas deferens agenesis. Diagnosis: permanently and irreversibly sterile. He found out when he was 22, Evelyn explained softly, her eyes filled with a deep, maternal pain. He was shattered. He couldn't accept it. He cut me out of his life shortly after, I think because I was the only one who knew his secret. He wanted a fresh start, a life where he could pretend it wasn't true. I stared at the paper, the world shifting on its axis for the third time. All those years. The appointments, the injections, the hope, the self-blame. The crushing weight I had carried, believing the failure was mine. It had all been a lie. A cruel, elaborate, and utterly pointless charade. He hadn't just betrayed me with my sister, he had betrayed me from the very beginning. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was tense and quiet. Chloe sat with her legal team, baby Liam Jr., sleeping peacefully in a carrier at her feet. She was dressed in somber navy blue, the picture of a grieving mother fighting for her child's rights. My parents sat directly behind her, their faces grim, a united front. Chloe's testimony was a masterclass in manipulation. She cried as she spoke of her forbidden love with Liam, of their plans to build a future together, of the child who was the last living piece of him. All I want is what he would have wanted, she finished, her voice breaking dramatically. For his son to be provided for. When it was his turn, Mr. Chun was calm and methodical. Your Honor, he said, his voice respectful. We have evidence to submit that calls the very foundation of this claim into question. He presented the medical records. Chloe's lawyer immediately objected, citing provenance and authenticity. They're fake. Chloe cried out, her composure cracking for the first time. She forged them. She's trying to steal my baby's inheritance. Given this evidence, Your Honor, Mr. Chin continued, unperturbed, we formally request a court-ordered DNA test to establish paternity. A triumphant smirk flickered across Chloe's face. That's impossible. Liam was cremated. There's no DNA to test against. That is not entirely accurate, Mr. Chin said, turning his gaze toward the back of the courtroom. We have a direct paternal relative. I would like to call Ms. Evelyn Monroe, Liam's biological mother, to the stand. Evelyn stood, her presence radiating a quiet dignity. A shocked murmur went through the room. I watched Chloe's face, saw the blood drain from it, saw the flicker of panic in her eyes as she looked from Evelyn to me. My parents stared, their mouths agape, their carefully constructed reality crumbling around them. The judge ordered the test. The 2 weeks we waited for the results were the longest of my life. When we reconvened, the air in the courtroom was thick with anticipation. The judge opened the sealed envelope, her expression unreadable. "The results of the DNA analysis are conclusive," she announced, her voice clear and firm. "There is zero probability that Ms. Evelyn Monroe is the paternal grandmother of the child, Liam Jr. It can therefore be stated with scientific certainty that the late Liam Vance was not the child's father." A collective gasp. Chloe crumpled, a raw, guttural sob escaping her lips. The judge's gaze was like ice. "Miss Thompson, in light of this court's findings, your entire claim is based on fraud. Would you care to name the child's actual father?" Through her tears, a choked whisper. I don't know for sure. There were a few men around that time. When Liam died, it just seemed easier." The judge's ruling was swift. The case was dismissed with prejudice. She noted that I would be well within my rights to press charges for fraud and perjury. Outside, in the cold, misty air, my parents cornered me. Their faces were ashen, aged a decade, in a single afternoon. "Alara, honey," my mother began, reaching for my arm. "We didn't know. We swear, we had no idea she was lying about that." "We've been so worried," my father added, his voice thin. "Since you stopped helping with the house. We could really use." I held up a hand, and they fell silent. I looked at their desperate, broken faces, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not hatred. Just a vast, empty quiet. The space where my love and longing for their approval used to be. "I need time," I said, my voice steady. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. A boundary. "I need to heal. Please, don't contact me." I turned and walked away, leaving them standing on the courthouse steps. Evelyn was waiting for me by her car. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. A strange, watery laugh escaped me. "I think I will be," I said, and for the first time, I believed it. I looked at this woman, this stranger who shared my late husband's eyes, who had given me back my sanity. "That condo Liam owned in the Pearl District," I said, an idea blooming in my mind. "I've never liked it. It's too modern, too cold. But I think you would love the view of the river." Tears welled in her eyes. "Alara, you don't have to." "I want to," I said. "You gave me the truth. Let me give you a home." That was 6 months ago. Life is different now. The vibrant colors haven't fully returned, but the oppressive gray has lifted, replaced by the soft, hopeful pastels of a Portland dawn. Evelyn and I have dinner together every Sunday. We are a strange, cobbled-together family, 2 women bound by a man we both loved and, in many ways, never truly knew. We talk about him, the good and the bad. She tells me stories of a sensitive, insecure boy, and I tell her about the charming, ambitious man he became. Together, we are creating a more complete, more honest picture of him. Last weekend, we finally packed up the last of his things. It wasn't a painful exorcism, but a quiet, reflective process. We found his old sketchbooks, filled with beautiful, impossible buildings, and we smiled. We found a box of my old letters to him, and we cried a little. I still live in our Craftsman house, but it feels like mine now. I've repainted the living room a warm, earthy green. I've joined a hiking club and rediscovered my love for the misty trails of Forest Park. I'm back at Stone and Vine full-time, finding joy in creation again. I don't know what the future holds with my parents and Chloe. My mother has left a few hesitant voicemails. My father sent a birthday card with a check, which I returned. Healing isn't a straight line, and forgiveness is a complicated, distant shore I'm not ready to swim toward. But some nights, When I'm sitting on my porch, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky, I feel a sense of peace. I lost the life I had planned, the family I was born into, the man I thought I knew. But in the wreckage, I found something else. I found a strength I never knew I possessed. I found a new, unexpected kind of family. And most importantly, in the quiet, empty spaces left by all that loss, I finally, truly found myself.